If you're watching this video, you're either a subscriber of mine or you want to delve into the weird and wonderful world of progressive rock, and I'm here to help you with that. Hi guys, my name's Neve. If you don't already know me, this is my channel, Neve the Prog Nerd. I discuss everything to do with prog, albums, all that kind of jazz. You know, I do reviews every Wednesday. So you're in the right place and you've got someone talking to you who's fairly knowledgeable about the subject itself. You know, I got into prog probably around 2 years ago now, and maybe it's not 45 years ago, but I think that I've acquired a lot of learning in the past 2 years of getting into the genre, and especially in the last few months with my new YouTube channel and getting more into the smaller cracks of progressive rock, the more lesser known bands, and the weirder part of progressive rock as well. I'm not going to talk about the weirder side of progressive rock because I remember when I first got into prog, I listened to an album called Larks, Tongues and Aspic by King Crimson, and out of the earlier side of King Crimson's discography, I chose that one, and I'm not sure why. I think I chose that one because I really liked the cover art, but I was into like Rush and stuff at the time, so I was like, I know about King Crimson, I know they're a very well-known band, a very respected band in the music community and especially in the progressive rock community, so I'll give this one a good old listen. I stopped listening to it about halfway through and I thought, I don't like this is too much for me. And, you know, a year and a half later, I've re-listened to that album on several occasions and loved it. So, progressive rock, if you are not into it already, is definitely an acquired taste. If it's something that you're not used to, then it will take a while for you to get into, especially the weirder side of it. So I'm going to show you the albums that I listened to and ones I would recommend to someone who wants to get into prog, doesn't know where to start, and, you know, doesn't want to be bombarded with the complete strangeness of things like Soft Machine and Van de Graaff Generator, which you beginners out there are not quite ready for without sounding pretentious. But these are, I think, 10 or 11 albums that I would recommend. If you would add something else, or if there was something that you got into that wasn't in my list, fair enough. These are just the ones that I think would be best for people who want to get into the genre. Now, I'm just going to describe a little bit about progressive rock as a whole and the whole listening experience surrounding progressive rock, because I think that this is a beginner's guide to the genre, so I want to inform you guys as much as possible. So if you don't know what progressive rock is, it is a subgenre of rock music that combines the forces of early classical music and jazz, and you put that together with a bit of psychedelia, a little bit of rock, classic rock, and you've got progressive rock. And a lot of experimentation will go on in this genre. You've got some of the best musicians performing some of the greatest, the most weird and wonderful music that I've ever heard and a lot of people have ever heard. This genre started probably mid to late 60s with bands like Procol Harum and stuff like that through to King Crimson, and then things like Yes came along, ELP, King Crimson, Genesis, all of those started to come along, and then eventually bands like Rush. My personal favourite prog band is, as you can tell, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but I am a massive Rush fan as well. But yeah, so when you are listening to progressive rock, here are some things that I would recommend doing. So, it's not party music. It's not something you put on and like kind of dance to in the sense of something like metal or something like classic rock and stuff like that. It's very much more sophisticated without sounding pretentious again, without demeaning these other groups, but it's something that's an listening experience. Now that sounds very, very pretentious and very kind of what the hell of me to say, but it is, and I think a lot of you prog fans out there would agree with me. It's something that's not appropriate for a party atmosphere. It's something that you would come home and sit down and listen to. It's something you will not play to dance to. You know, I've never seen anyone dance to prog and be able to. When you listen to the music, focus on it. You know, focus on what's going on, focus on the musicianship, focus on the lyrics if there are any, and just completely immerse yourself in the music and the genre itself. And the more you do that, the more you'll start to realise why people love this genre so much and why it's such an important genre in the history of music. I personally love to listen to prog with headphones, because if you listen to it just on like a speaker like that, or just like a tinny speaker, then you're not getting the best possible listening experience. Any old headphones will do, or if you're listening to vinyl, then those speakers will be great as well. because when you have headphones and you have very good speakers, you're able to pick up on things that maybe aren't heard through like an external speaker or your phone speaker or something like that, because you've got, you know, panning, you've got weird effects, you've got things going on that you can't really get into with external speakers that are pretty crappy. And the last thing, don't get too disheartened if you don't get it on the first try. It takes a while. Prog is one of those things that definitely takes a while to get into, especially if it's something that you're not used to and something that you're not into. I was into metal before I got into progressive rock, so I kind of had the luxury of listening to things like Dream Theater and Tool before I got into prog, but I did like my fair share of classic rock and stuff before that as well, during that part, and definitely listening to things like Lark's Tongue to Aspic and things like Tales from Topographic Oceans from Yes and Close to the Edge and all these, and Tarkus and stuff like that. I was just completely lost. I was like, what's going on? Why am I here? I don't know if I like this. I don't rate this. But give it a few tries, and if you're still not into it, you're not into it. But I think that prog is, as I said in the beginning, very much an acquired taste, and it is my favourite genre of music. You probably don't see a lot of girls talking about prog, sadly, because this community can be quite gatekeepy at times. I've had comments of people like, girls shouldn't be listening to prog, or this is a man's genre. Just ignore it. I ignore it all the time. I laugh at it, to be honest, because, you know, what do you know? Music's not for one person or one minority. Music's for everyone. I guarantee you if these groups heard you saying things like that, they wouldn't be too happy. But nonetheless, I'm very much going on a bit here, but one of my favourite things about prog, also, just a quick side note, is that it's a very interesting genre. It's not like the same throughout, because you've got so many different types of prog, so many different types of atmosphere and vibe and all that kind of stuff. You've got things that are quite aggressive, and then you've got things that are quite delicate, you've got things that are really dark, and you've got things that are really light-hearted. For example, something like Red by King Crimson is quite a dark record, quite a heavy record, and then you've got something like the Yes album, which is quite light-hearted and quite just light to listen to. It's not as heavy. That's not demeaning at all. I adore the Yes album. But here we go. So these are my personal picks, ones that I listened to while I was getting into prog. Ones that I wish I had heard first before getting into prog. And yeah, here we go. So the first, I'm going to use this just as an example of like a group to listen to, but this is my favourite Moody Blues album. I'll take it out here. This is To Our Children's Children's Children, as I said, by the Moody Blues. This is a great album, some kind of late 60s prog. The reason I suggest this is because it's not too challenging to listen to. It's quite easy and not too difficult to understand, and I love the Moody Blues a lot. I really like their sound. It's very melancholy, very beautifully written, and you know, people know tracks like Nights in White Satin and all that kind of stuff, which is technically under the progressive rock umbrella. It's more on the poppier side, but great group, Moody Blues. I highly recommend them if you want to get into prog, and yeah. So maybe you'll be a bit surprised to see this on here, but this is Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield, a very, very well-known album. A lot of people don't consider this really progressive rock. I am on the fence about it, but this is a 45 to 50 minute long instrumental album. It's in two parts. You've got Tubular Bells Part 1 and Part 2. The reason I suggest this one is because out of all the instrumental things that I've listened to and the longer things that I've listened to, this isn't actually too challenging, because the first time I heard this I fell in love with it, and that was before I got into prog. I think this is while I was still into metal, and I still really, really loved this, and I guess that it helped that I'd listened to Pink Floyd and I was exposed to longer music. But this is very, very easy to listen to, very, very great to listen to. It's one that I usually, I'll come home and just listen to Tubular Bells. It's definitely one that you really got to sit down and listen to. I've never been able to listen to this like half of the track and then move. I have to listen to the whole thing, because it's one of those things. It's one album, it's just split into parts. You just gotta listen to the whole thing. And I really do recommend this. It's got so much great material on it. Instrumentation is fantastic. It's all done by one guy, Mike Oldfield, with I think some occasional helpers here and there, but it's a fantastic record, one that I really would suggest to someone who wants to try out prog. As I said, not the instrumentation, the instrumentals aren't too difficult to grasp, and there's no real big concept to it. So I think that this is great for anyone who wants to try out prog. Well, to decide which Yes album I wanted to include in this, because I was thinking, well, is this one too difficult for someone, or is this one, because I was kind of on the fence of putting in Close to the Edge, but I thought that when I first heard that I was confused by it. But I'm going to put in Fragile, and this is an alternate cover, as I've mentioned before. Fantastic album, very, very good one to get into prog with. It's a very highly rated album just in the music community overall. It's got Roundabout on it, it's got, you know, South Side of the Sky, it's got Heart Sunrise. Some very great tracks on here. There are some points where it's very, like, weird, but it's not too hard to understand. This isn't a concept album either. I think concept albums, you know, steer clear of those for a while, because some prog concept albums are so out there that they're very hard to understand sometimes. But this is such a brilliant album, and I think that this is great for anyone who wants to try out listening to Yes. And I was thinking of putting in the Yes album because of the kind of lightness of it, but I thought that the tracks were, you know, broken down to, like, too kind of strange in a way. But this is a great album to get into, and yeah. You probably all know Roundabout by now, so check out the album while you're at it. Of course there was going to be an ELP album in here, because I think that this particular album, this is the self-titled debut of the band, I think this one's quite a good one to start off with, because I wouldn't chuck someone into the deep end with something like Tarkus or Brain Salad Surgery with Carnival 9 and stuff on it. But this one's very good because it's got a perfect balance of the kind of heaviness of, like, the intro, the Barbarian, just like the crashing intro, and then the things like Lucky Man, which are quite easy to listen to and are very, very good for getting into prog, that side of prog. But this has got some just very good songs, of course. I'm a big ELP fan. Yeah, just a great album. Three Fates is probably one that took me a while to get into because it was a completely kind of weird instrumental piano thing. But things like, you know, Knife Edge, Barbarian, Lucky Man, of course, great ones to start off with because they're not too hard to understand, but the instrumentation is absolutely brilliant, absolutely fantastic, and, you know, it'll make you want to play, it'll make you want to learn the songs, so where can you go wrong there? You all knew this was going to come up, and I really think it is an important album when you want to get into progressive rock, and this is Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. This is not strictly a prog album, going back to when I was talking about Tubular Bells, but this is a really good album as like a gateway because it's got the progressive rock aspects, but it's also got this, you know, psychedelic rock aspects as well. But it's a very well-known album. It's a very, very good album. Not my favourite of Pink Floyd, but still a great album. Songs aren't too long, songs aren't too challenging, and yeah, when I say that, I really don't mean to sound A, pretentious, or B, demeaning the album whatsoever. As I say, I love these albums, but it's very easy to listen to this album, and it's very not complicated at all, and just very good overall. But I highly recommend this one, because as I said, it's a gateway into the progressive rock world, and also the weirder side of Pink Floyd with things like, you know, metal and animals and stuff like that. Aqualung by Jethro Tull. Now the reason I put this one in is, again, nothing too complex and probably nothing you've not heard before, because if you like things like Deep Purple and you like things like Black Sabbath, even Led Zeppelin, you will love this album because of just the overall feel of the album. I mean, it's so chunky because of the guitar tone, the chunky Gibson sound, and you obviously hear that with Black Sabbath, with that chunky SG sound. This is more of a Les Paul sound, but this is such a good album to listen to. It's very heavy, it's very cool, it's very rocky, it's one that really will make you sing along and stuff like that, and it's just really, really great album. Very interesting lyrics, very kind of grotesque imagery and stuff like that, but that adds to the whole experience of the album, and I just think it's a very good one if you want to try out prog. Listen to this one, definitely a good one. Thick as a Brick is also a good one, but that one I wouldn't recommend to people who want to get into prog, because again, it's like a two-parter album, but there's so much going on in that, and you know, when I was getting into prog, too much overwhelmed me. So I think the less is better when you want to get into progressive rock, because you want to start off slow. You don't want to chuck yourself into, you know, the magmas of this world, or the Van de Graaff generators, or the soft machines. You want to start where you'll actually enjoy the genre and build up to that point. It's like metal. I mean, I listened to a lot of like emo stuff before I got into things like Metallica and Iron Maiden. I mean, I hated both of those bands when I first listened to them, but now they're two of my favourite bands. I mean, Iron Maiden is my all-time favourite band, so some things just take a while to get used to. Selling England by the Pound by Genesis. I was thinking either this one or Nursery Crime. I think that Genesis, early Genesis, not, I wouldn't put in Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, because that is a very kind of hard to grasp album. But definitely things like Nursery Crime and Foxtrot and stuff like that, Trespass as well. But especially this one because of the theatrical side of it, because when I was introduced to Genesis, I really loved that part of their music and their live shows and stuff like that. And I just really enjoyed watching visually. The music was so good, nothing too difficult to understand, and just absolutely beautiful music all around, especially this album. There's nothing too weird about this album, you know. I mean, lyrics are of course very interesting, but you just gotta deal with that when you come to prog. But the music itself is just amazing. I mean, Further Fifth, great track to get into. Same with I Know What I Like, in brackets, in your wardrobe. Now, I wanted to put a King Crimson album in here, but as I mentioned at the beginning, I was not going to put in Lark's Tongues in Aspic, because when I first heard that, I really did not like it very much. It's grown to be one of my favourite albums, but it took a long time. But I'm going to put in The Court of the Crimson King, because this is their most well-known one, and one that is it's got its very strange points. It's got its jamming points, it's got its very jazzy points, but I think that if you want to get into prog, you've got to expect that long instrumental weirdness of just jazz, fusion, and all that kind of stuff. But this is such a great album. It's got the dynamics of the really hard, rocky kind of feel, mixed with the kind of delicate, more acoustic things of things like I Talk to the Wind, and then obviously you've got, you know, 21st Century Schizoid Man, which is a crashing, great rock song to listen to, and same with the actual title track in The Court of the Crimson King, which is probably one of the best progressive rock epics ever. It's just got some great guitar work, great everything about this album is so great for a beginner who wants to get into prog. After this, I'd probably suggest something like In the Wake of Poseidon, because that's very Moody Blues-esque, very kind of melancholy, that kind of feel. But this one is definitely one to get into. I had this debate in my head, was I going to put in this album? But I thought, yeah, I'm going to put it in, because you've got to expect the weird and wonderful side of progressive rock, because it's going to have its jamming points, of course. It's going to have points where the musicians will just go off and have like a 20-minute jam. But if that's what you like, then that's what you like. But this is very, very good, and one that I would highly suggest to someone. I've tried getting people to listen to this and they just won't. But it's so, so good, and so good to start off getting into progressive rock and the weirder side of it, because King Crimson is definitely the stranger side of it. I mean, while listening to King Crimson, which I'm still into at the moment, I've been able to listen to things like Van de Graaff Generator and stuff like that, because of, you know, how weird and wonderful it is. But In the Court of the Crimson King, one of the albums that really popularised the genre itself. I mean, it came out in 1969, so it really kind of pushed prog into the kind of public a bit more. This is The Turn of a Friendly Card by the Alan Parsons Project. Now, I put this one in, this came out in 1980, so a bit past the kind of prime years of progressive rock. But this is such a great album to listen to get into prog, because again, not too challenging, but just fantastic all around, great musicianship, great songs, and just an overall great album, one that's not too challenging, as I say. And, you know, when I first listened to this, which actually wasn't too long ago, it was just so great. I was so blown away by it, because I'd never really listened to much Alan Parsons Project stuff anyway, but I obviously knew who Alan Parsons was. And just listening to this made me think, well, this is a great album to give someone who doesn't know much about prog and wants to get into it. So I'd probably either pick this one or, I was debating either this one or Eye in the Sky, but I think this one's more on the proggier side than Eye in the Sky, because that's quite more poppy, because that was like at the start of the 80s, like this one, but that was like I think 82 or 81. But this is a great album to get into, and it's a beautiful album. It's got a great concept as well, and I just highly recommend it. Queen 2 by Queen. Now, you're probably thinking, well, Queen isn't a prog band. Queen doesn't do anything proggy, do they? This is a very proggy album for Queen. This is such a great gateway album to get into prog. I mean, I heard it after I got into prog, but this is growing to be one of my favourite Queen albums because of how proggy and just more interesting than some of the stuff that they've done. I mean, I love Queen, I love a lot of their discography. I kind of grew up on them in a way. But this, and I think News of the World is still my favourite Queen album. That hasn't got anything remotely proggy in it at all. But this one's great for people who want to get into prog and don't want to start off too weird, like too heavy, like just too full on, you know, too jazzy or too weird or anything. This is just some great classic rock mixed with prog. It's got its like kind of glam rock sides of it. I mean, look at the inner sleeve's quite glam rockish, but yeah, this is just a great album. I say this one and the first one as well. Some great guitar tone, very, you know, just very good. Overall, I think this is some of Queen's best work. Maybe I'll get a lot of people getting annoyed at the fact that I put a Queen album in a prog list, but... And finally, the moment you may or may not have been waiting for. Of course I'm going to put a Rush album in here, but again I was just thinking, which one do I put in? Because my first Rush album that I ever heard was 2112. And I don't think that I would give that to someone who wants to get into prog, just because of the first track and how hard it was for me to grasp. I mean, the concept is just very difficult to grasp. It was hard for me to get, and maybe... I mean, listen to what you want, but this is obviously a video on what I would personally recommend. So I'm going to put in Fly By Night. This is their second studio album, and the reason I picked this one is because it's got the perfect blend of Rush's kind of first early career, which was like hard rock, classic rock based. And with this album, obviously with the entrance of Neil Peart, so we've got the entrance of the more proggier side of the group with tracks like By Tour and the Snow Dog and stuff like that. The entrance of longer tracks in the band. So I recommend this one because it's not too challenging. If you're into classic rock and stuff like that, you're definitely going to love this, because not only has it got things like the classic rock influence, but it's also got the entrance of prog, the, you know, the stems of this band becoming a more progressive rock band. And yeah, I was thinking either this one or Moving Pictures, but I think this one is a lot easier for people who are already into classic rock, who are already into that kind of stuff, which I guarantee if you are trying to get into prog, you've probably heard a lot. My phone keeps running out of storage. But anyway, yeah, as I was saying, I wouldn't, if you're getting into prog, I guarantee you're not, you know, you haven't heard anything kind of classic rocky before, like jazzy or anything. Alright, anyway, that concludes my video, so let me know what you guys thought of this video. Are you already into prog, or what albums got you into prog? Let me know if you're already into the genre and you're just checking in to see what I'm talking about. What are your favourite prog albums? Share this with anyone who might be interested in getting into progressive rock and don't know where to start. You know, send them over this video. I think that'd be great. I think that I've been quite informative this video. Let me know if I've sounded or came across too pretentious or too up my own or too stuck up or anything like that. I'm very sorry. It's not my intention. I am just trying to not get people, you know, you walk before you run, you know, you can't just listen to something really weird like Soft Machine as you're getting into prog, because that just wouldn't, I mean, unless you're used to that kind of stuff, it just wouldn't, it's not really appropriate to get into that kind of Canterbury side of prog just yet. You know, you start small and you work your way up. But yeah, Wednesday's video, I'll be doing a review, as you guys know, and this week's review is my 10th. So it's my 10th review this week, so I've asked my boyfriend Yoan to pick my album, and I will let you guys know what that is when the video finishes. I'll put it in the community tab, maybe, I don't know. Or I'll just leave you guys to wait for it. But yeah, Thanks for watching, and I know this has been quite a long video, but it is a very rambly one, and one that I've been very excited to film. Sorry that I keep moving angles, but my phone just keeps running out of storage. But as I was saying, I've been really excited to film this video. It's been on my list for a long time because I really would love to see more people getting into prog. I mean, it's something that could happen, but not quite sure yet. But I think this video might be good for people who want to get into the genre. Maybe people even my age, maybe a bit younger, who like classic rock, who like that side of the 70s, to experience a different kind of music and a different approach to music. So yeah, see you guys on Wednesday and have a good day. I mean, in the UK we've got some great weather, so go outside, enjoy yourself, but stick to the COVID rules. Alright, see you guys on Wednesday. Bye bye.